Good evening. I'm going to call this meeting to order. I might be a few seconds shy of 5 p.m. Oh, there it is, 5 p.m. Roll call, please. Dr. Foley.
President Kaler, members of the board, please let the record show that 4 board members are present. Mr. Witovich is not able to join us this evening.
Thank you very much. We are going to have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. .1, I move that we approve the agenda.
Second.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Next up, we have the superintendent's report. Please, Dr. Foley.
President Kaler, members of the board, tonight we start with awards and recognitions. And I'm excited tonight to start with a unique segment for this portion, which is thank you for your service. Tonight is the official last board meeting for 2 of our governing board members. Governing board members, as you well know, are elected officials who spend hours and hours and hours dedicated to the work of their community, from reviewing board packets to attending meetings to studying to being the eyes, the ears, and the heart and the reflection of the soul of our community. And so we are so grateful for the work that you do. Tonight, we want to honor 2 individuals. Scott Glover, who has been with the Higley Board since 2017, and also Greg Witovich from 2015. So tonight, on behalf of 13,434 students and 1,479 employees, we thank you. We thank you for all that you have done for this community. So with our hearts, we thank you. At your space tonight, we have a small token, a little gift with your name engraved, some cards, some thoughts on a pin, a little box for you to hold on to as a memento for the work that you've done for our district, and we thank you for that. So.
Thank you, Dr. Foley. Mr. Glover, I might even tear up a little bit, but I have to say, we're going to miss you. And I just want to thank you for your awesome representation of our teachers and our staff. You brought to light so many things that I personally didn't experience because I'm not a teacher, and you brought that to this board, and I so much appreciate that. Your dedication to the profession in our community is stellar. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and you will be missed. And I know where to find you. And I hope Mr. Witovich is watching. Mr. Witovich always brought to this board a level of wanting higher education or a trade, or he always pushed our students to their utmost capacity, and I just appreciated that for him, of him. I know that as a board, he always challenged us to be the best of the best. And so for that too, we will miss his leadership on this school board. So Mr. Witovich, if you're out there, we are forever grateful.
Thank you. So President Kaler, members of the board, tonight we have other celebrations too. I know that this is one of your very favorite parts, and this is our Points of Pride, where we have an opportunity to highlight a school, and the administration will recognize student, staff members, and community members who have exemplified awesomeness on their campus. So obviously we've been doing this COVID style for a few weeks now, and so I'm going to invite Principal Armstrong and Vice Principal Griggs to come up so that they can help us celebrate superstars at Coronado.
President Kaler, members of the board, Associate Superintendent Foley, and Cabinet, I appreciate you guys for having us tonight. My name is Mr. Armstrong, Jeff Armstrong. I'm the proud principal of Coronado Elementary, home to the Coyote Nation, and we're very excited to acknowledge 4 outstanding people, and I will tell you it's 4 amongst many. So it was a very difficult decision to choose only 4, but we are excited to do so. This is my very outstanding assistant principal, Mr. Griggs. He's going to start us off. He's going to do his 2 first, and then I'll do my 2.
We're going to start with our students. So Zoe, come on up. So let's give Zoe Robinson a hand. All right. You excited? I don't need to be nervous. I'm going to tell people how awesome you are. All right. So at Coronado, we have the Coyote Way. And so that's the pause. So positive perseverance, acting respectfully, working to potential, and staying safe. And Zoe Robinson is a student who understands pause and demonstrates it on a daily basis. Her positive perseverance can be seen as she works through challenging problems in class to provide her teachers with an accurate understanding of the content. She shows so much respect towards staff and students. She demonstrates it, and she does it in a very Zoe Robinson type of way, and it's very much appreciated. She is a true leader in this regard. And then working to potential is a trait that Zoe thrives on. She wants to meet both academic and social high levels of standards, and we really appreciate that, and she does it on a daily basis. And then staying safe is what Zoe does by demonstrating correct behavior in the hallways, cafeteria, classroom, and we cannot wait to see the success and accomplishments that Zoe will just as you go on, not only as you finish out your second semester of 6th grade, but junior high, high school, and beyond. We are just very appreciative that you have let us be a part of your educational journey. So thank you, Zoe. All right, I'm going to have you introduce your family. So just tell us who's here.
Oh, so I have my mom, Sarah Robinson, my dad, Joseph Robinson, and my brother, Jalen Robinson.
And thank you guys for being an awesome family. Okay, then you go sit. Sorry, we'll take a photo. Nice job, Zoe. And then to honor our volunteer, we've got Miss Corbin. Come on down. So Miss Taryn Corbin, worked with her for the past couple years, but especially, as many of you know, it is tough to take on something in the middle of things and to be able to figure out how processes work. So Miss Corbin jumped in as the PTO treasurer in the middle of a school year last year and was able to do a stellar job. And so thank you so much. And especially, I know our students and teachers especially appreciate the work that you did with the Accelerated Reader. Not only as a PTO treasurer is she keeping track of the books and doing an accurate job of it, but she's also negotiating. And so she did not realize that that was a skill set that she would need to employ, and she does it phenomenally. And so thank you for that. Being able to take initiative to make sure that not only the students and staff, but also the whole Coronado community gets really what they need. And the way that you do it in such a polite but yet firm way is amazing. And so nice job with that. We cannot thank you enough for your dedication and commitment to Coronado Elementary and the Coyote Nation. Thank you, Ms. Corbin. So I'm going to have you introduce who you brought.
So I have my Coronado Coyotes, Adley and Ellery, and then my son Dax, who's not there yet but will be soon, and my husband David.
Thank you guys for loaning us your mom for so many hours each week. So thank you guys. And we'll take a photo.
All right, we're going to start off with a classified staff member, and we are going to nominate and recognize Miss Angela Golay. Angela is our office manager. Her commitment to the Coronado Elementary in the Coyote Nation goes above and beyond in everything she does. She holds me very accountable to my schedule, I will tell you that. She makes sure that every staff, every student, every parent is well taken care of when they enter our building. She is in charge of ensuring that our documents are up to date. She's in charge of ensuring that our front office runs as smooth as possible. And we are the most beautiful campus because her birthday is this month and it's her favorite holiday. So Angela, with everything you do, we can't thank you enough. You're absolutely amazing. Thank you for serving the Coyote Nation.
I brought my husband, Walter Golay, and my Coronado daughter, Ashlyn. My other two kids are daycare and with their other mom and stepdad, so that's who I brought.
All right. The next person we're going to nominate and recognize is Miss Kristen Eidelman. Miss Eidelman has been on our campus for an extremely long time. She said, she didn't let me finish. She is a rock star. She serves as our honor school leadership team as our special education department representative. She understands firmly every student means every student and all means all. She is willing to assist any classroom teacher when they need it. She's willing to assist with special education strategies as well as any way she can help. When we talk about what Coyote Nation is and our pause, she represents it and she forces and encourages our students to understand it as well. And we want to thank you for everything you do because you put in so many hours and you're so dedicated to our students. So thank you very much.
I have my husband Brian and my daughters Peyton and Aaron, who have both graduated from Coronado.
There it is. Family legacy.
Thank you, Principal Armstrong and Principal Griggs, for highlighting our Coronado Superstar Points of Pride for this board meeting. We appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you. I'll transition to upcoming events. This next week, we are pleased to host Maricopa officials will be here when we have our swearing in for our two new board members, Tiffany Schultz and Michelle Anderson, on Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And then obviously on the 18th, we begin winter break. So that concludes our superintendent's report.
Thank you so much. And I think everybody can't wait for that break. Moving on.
Well,
Board comments.
it's okay for these guys to leave.
Oh.
This isn't the appropriate time if you don't want to stay for the whole meeting.
Yes, we're used to it and we understand. So thank you so much for coming tonight. Mr. Armstrong, you have to stay. No, just kidding. Okay, moving on. Board comments.
President Kaler.
Go ahead, Mrs. Wilson.
I just wanted to remind our community that the United Food Bank is offering pickup at Higley High. Dr. Foley, make sure I'm correct on all the details, tonight at 5:30. And if you need some food, go over there and they'll put it in your trunk for you, and there's no judgment or no questions asked, and you can just get some food boxed up and delivered in your car. Am I correct on everything? Okay.
That's awesome. Mr. Glover.
Thank you, President Kaler. I also thank you guys. I don't need any thanks. I'm happy with the job that we've done. I wanted to thank Mr. Witovich as well. But I kind of favor what MacArthur said, that old soldiers never die, they just fade away. But before my next comments, I just want to say I have absolutely no aspirations for any other elected office at all. But people have been asking me, what is it like? And I think we always need good people. So I thought for the last time I would dispense some unsolicited advice. I was just reflecting that so much has happened over the last 4 years. There's a whole lot that I'm proud of. I always tried my best. I apologized when I made mistakes, and I made some. We developed this strategic plan, and we keep it up here with us at all times. It's laminated, and Ms. Reach, you're going to have to make another one because I'm taking this with me. But it's guided us along the way, and we've made some real progress. And we've lost some people along the way, as you do. Some went on to greater things. We've promoted some really good people, and we've recruited some outside good people to bring new talent into Higley. And, as an elected official, you don't always get what you want all the time or when you want it, but you never stop fighting, and perseverance is important if you're ever going to serve in any elected position. I just want to thank you guys because I learned a lot about myself along the way. I learned about how to treat people. I learned a lot about the people who live in this community. There's some really, really good, giving, generous, kind people. But I always was guided by 4 things, and I think we started to say them here in Higley, and I hope it stays here. I would always ask myself, is it good for kids? Secondly, is it good for teachers? Is it good for the district? And then is it good for the community? And if I can answer yes, 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 and yes, then I tried to work with everybody to try to make those things happen. And I think that's a really good way to look at decision making in a school district. I want to wish the incoming board members the best of luck, as do I do the superintendency and the cabinet and all of our staff, and thank them for their hard work and good nature. I'm sure I haven't always been the easiest to work with. I wanted to thank Dr. Thomason, who's had great patience with me as I learned along the way. The first year is a rough one for anybody serving on a school board for the first time. I think you all would agree. He's a good man. I liked him. He's a good mentor, and he has a good heart, and I will miss him. And this to our teachers and staff, I just want to say, stay involved, stay vocal. You are not serfs. Nobody lords over you. You are citizens also. You are taxpayers also. You have First Amendment rights. You have a part in all of this, and never be afraid to stand up for what you believe in. Otherwise, people will just walk all over you. I was most proud to stand with you during Red Fred. It was democracy in action, and it was, to me, glorious to behold. And we made a difference. We really made a difference in public ed, but now we still need you more than ever. So run for office. Having a voice of a public school educator in any debate is so valuable, and teachers and people who work in public ed are the best people I know, hands down. They are altruists, they're empaths, they're selfless. You got a lot to offer, and we need more of that right now throughout every level of our government. And I'm sure there are plenty of people who are more talented, work harder than I do, smarter than I am, definitely ones who are more likable and inspirational than I am. So run, stay involved, and vote. Vote in your own best interest and for that which you have dedicated your life. Elect pro-public education representation. We have so much more to do in this country if we are to live up to one of our nation's creeds that most of us say 5 times a week, and that is liberty and justice for all. So I guess we're not done with the meeting, but it's also have to remind you to stay well, wash your hands, get tested, wear your mask properly, stay home if you're sick, avoid large gatherings until we're all vaccinated, and look out for one another. That's why communities exist. Look out for one another. So thank you to everybody for all the good wishes. I got a lot of nice emails, and I thank you for this. I didn't peek in there yet, but I'm sure I will treasure it. And just know that I will quietly be rooting for all of you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Glover. Appreciate your kind words. And yeah, open your gift. Anything else? Board comments? Thank you. Any requests to speak, Mrs. Reach? No. Okay, we're moving on to consent. I move that we approve consent agenda items 6.1 to 6.7.
Second.
Questions?
Just one, President Kaler. 6.6, I guess, can Mrs. Anderson, you're here. Are you guys are aware you're okay with the calendar changes? And Ms. Schultz, I assume? Yes? Okay, good. That's all I needed.
Yes, thank you for that. We did change the times. We've been meeting at 5 p.m., and so we thought we'd keep up with that. Mrs. Anderson and Mrs. Schultz, I think we're both able to do that. And also having one meeting in January too, because we're going to have 2 training sessions. And so talking with Dr. Foley and Mrs. Reach, we kind of finagled the calendar a little bit just for January because of that training. And it would have been board meeting training, and it was a lot. So we did want to make that little change for January. Okay, with that said, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Going on to information items. And we have the overview of the Higley School District COVID-19 dashboard. Dr. Foley.
Yes, President Kaler, members of the board. In our previous meeting, we talked about this roadshow that we were doing, that we were going to the schools to help give clarity to how does our dashboard work, what goes on the dashboard, how do we track that. And again, we talked a lot at our last meeting how there are different dashboards out there. Obviously, the Maricopa County dashboard reflects the numbers as a whole in the whole community, and it's updated on 2-week-old data. Our dashboard is different. It's updated weekly, and it's reflecting cases on campus in which there was exposure that triggered communication. And so we talked a little bit about it and mentioned at our meeting last time that we would bring that back to show that. So I want to say a quick thank you to Jillian and to Curtis who put together a video. So what they did is they took the PowerPoint here and made a video. So what we're going to do is show you the video because we'll also be posting this online, and then you can ask questions. So essentially this is the very same PowerPoint you saw narrated. So we'll start with the presentation of the video, and then we'll follow up with questions and additional information on our dashboard.
This informational video will help you with the process, examples, and questions and answers about COVID-19 with the Higley Unified School District. The positive COVID-19 case process. There are many ways that we find out about a COVID-19 case. Many times it's from a family, it's from the individual, or it can be from the health department. Once a case is confirmed with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, the investigation process starts. HUSD and the Maricopa Department of Public Health work collaboratively to conduct the investigation, and we determine primary and secondary contacts together. After this point, the notification process begins. The positive COVID-19 case notification. If you are identified as a primary contact, you receive a phone call from myself and the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. In some situations, the school administrator will help me conduct phone calls. You receive written communication from HUSD, which comes from the Maricopa County Department of Health regarding quarantine. Just remember that as an essential employee, you will not quarantine if you do not have symptoms. Secondary contact. HUSD sends out secondary contact notices which say there's a positive case on campus. On the elementary level, those go by grade, and on the secondary school level, they go by the student or the employee's schedule. When you are not notified. You are not notified if the positive individual was not on campus during their exposure period, and I will show you some example slides coming up. Additionally, you are not notified if you are not associated with the positive individual's schedule. Also, you are not notified if the individual says they are positive and in fact they are not. The definition of exposure period. Maricopa County Department of Public Health defines the exposure period as 2 days before illness onset, or for asymptomatic patients, 2 days prior to test specimen collection. HUSD follows Maricopa County Department of Public Health guidance for every COVID-19 case. The first example of an exposure period. In this example, you will see that the individual was last on campus on Wednesday, November 11th, that orange box. They developed symptoms on Thursday, November 12th, that's the blue box. They tested on Friday, November 13th, that green box. The exposure period goes 2 days back from development of symptoms or test collection. 2 days back from November 12th is November 10th and 11th, that red bar covering the 10th and 11th of November. In this example, there was a positive case on campus and notifications will be sent. Our second example of exposure period. The individual was last on campus on November 12th, the orange box. They developed symptoms on November 17th, that is the blue box. They tested on November 18th, that green box. The exposure period goes back 2 days from development of symptoms or test collection. In this example, that would be 2 days back from November 17th, November 15th and 16th, that red bar on the 15th and 16th of November. In this example, there was not a positive case on campus. During the exposure period, the positive individual was not on a campus and there is no one to notify. This is an example of our dashboard. An individual developed symptoms on November 15th, the blue box. They tested on November 17th, the yellow box. They received the results on November 20th, the green box. HUSD is notified, the health department investigation has begun, primary and secondary contacts are identified and notified. The case goes on the dashboard the morning of November 24th, the first purple box. When someone is diagnosed with COVID-19, they are automatically put into a 10-day isolation period. Their isolation period starts on the day that they develop symptoms or the day they tested, whichever is first. In this case, they developed symptoms on November 15th. They will be isolated through November 25th, and the case is resolved on November 26th. That is when the case will come off of the dashboard active column and moved into resolved. The second example from our dashboard is an individual developed symptoms on November 3rd. They test for COVID on November 4th. The results come back also on November 4th. Family notifies HUSD and the case investigation is done with the health department. Primary and secondary contacts are notified. That's the orange box. The case is put on the dashboard the morning of November 6th, that first purple box. Remember, when an individual is diagnosed with COVID-19, they start their 10-day isolation on the date that they started symptoms or the date the test was collected, whichever is first. In this case, their 10-day isolation starts on Tuesday, November 3rd. After the 10-day isolation, their case is removed from the active column and moved to resolved on November 14th. Case data. This is an example of the data that we have between September 8th, 2020, when HUSD opened for in-person learning, and November 30th, 2020. At that time, there were 158 positive cases on campuses across the HUSD district. Staff made up 37 of those 158 positive cases on campus. 72% of the staff cases did not follow policy and procedure. And by that, I mean they came to work sick. That is the majority of not following the policy and procedure for staff. Of the 158 positive cases at that time, 121 of those cases on campus were from students. 74% of the student cases have not followed policy and procedure. When examining our own positive HUSD cases, we are finding that almost all these situations are attributed to the infected individual's involvement in off-campus activities, such as parties, sleepovers, or attendance to events where preventative measures were not followed. Should you have any questions, please contact site administration or the district nurse. This informational video will help you with the process.
President Kaler, members of the board, so you'll see that this video is a quick description of how cases come on, how we are tracking those, and I want to acknowledge that Jillian spends hours, as you can imagine, each one of these stories and identifying the who, the when, the what, and the when it comes on and comes off is hours of work. But again, this is how we are tracking what goes on the dashboard, because those are the cases where there was exposure or potential that we need to make people aware of, that there was active cases on campus that are contributing to the percentage of positivity. One of the things that we are going to be sending to families is, as we get ready to go into the holiday break, that we're going to let them know that the dashboard will continue to be monitored and updated over break. In other words, if we have, we're going to communicate with families that if for any reason their child tests positive, that they are to reach out by email to their administration and to Jillian. Keep in mind the county also continues to make us aware when those positive cases come in as well, so that we'll follow up on those, so that if there was any exposure, I mean, when we're on break, you may get notification if any cases come in and they were on campus for that exposure period. There's a potential we may be on our second day of break and you'll get a notification that there was a positive case on campus if that's the case. So we're going to let people know that, again, the dashboard will continue to be updated over winter holiday, with the exception of the December 24th, 25th, and December 31st and January 1st, which are holidays. But that way we're monitoring any and all of those scenarios that come in any of those ways. So that communication will go out prior to holiday break. We'll also be placing this PowerPoint on our website as an additional communication, and obviously directing people to reach out with questions and concerns if they have them, on how we're reporting and reflecting that on that dashboard.
Questions, comments? Mrs. Wilson.
Dr. Foley, I heard you say at the beginning of the presentation that we update every week. Do we update every day or every week?
I was talking about two things. The Maricopa County dashboard, we get updated once a week, but that's 2-week-old data. Our data is updated daily, and you saw the examples of how and when they go on. And again, also you saw in the video, why would something hit an active and then be gone a few days later? Obviously depends upon the individual circumstances of that case, but it's also important to remember that even in that time, students were not on campus. We're not on campus. So.
Great. Thank you. I just want to make that very clear that we update every day, except for weekends.
Except for weekends or holidays, and that will will continue over the winter break, except for those 2 holidays each week.
Thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed hearing what our staff is hearing.
Mrs. Reese.
President Kaler, thank you. I know this is a loaded question, and I just want for us to kind of, not tonight, but to think about, talk about, as referenced in the video, the majority of our cases are also people not following our policy and procedure, both students and staff. We created a COVID policy to try and protect our students and our staff. I know our staff definitely feels obligated. They want to come to work, but when they're sick, they're sick. They need to stay home. If there's any concern, they need to stay home. And I know there's a lot of concern on, we don't have substitutes. We can't find people to cover classes. I need to go, and things like that. But looking at 74% not following our policies and procedures is concerning to me. And I mean, this board, we've talked a lot about policies and procedures, and we have put these in place to protect both our students and our staff. So tonight obviously is not the night to discuss and debate and have conversation, but I would like for our administration to have this conversation. I know it's tough to say, oh, well, we suspend people for less, and this and that. And there is a difference between kid action and their actions and their parents' actions and everything. But I think that this needs to be a topic of conversation between our district administration and our site administrations on, is there anything further we can do? What can we do? How can we handle it from the student side? How can we handle it from the staff side? I am very concerned with that amount, with that percentage not following our safety protocols. Even more concerning, we've been fortunate, but we've seen our numbers increase in our community, and we know kids are safer at school, but when you have almost 75% people not following what does keep us safe, we're not going to be a safe place for long. So I'm thankful for the break. That's a natural break, but I would like for some of those discussions to be had. I'm sure some have, but I do find that very concerning. Such a high percentage not following our policies and procedures. public education is a right. We are fortunate to be in person, and I don't want to lose that privilege right now because 75% can't follow safety protocols and policies and procedures, and we need to make sure it's communicated to our teachers and staff. If you're out, you're out. If you're sick, you're sick, and it will be figured out. It may not be pretty, but making sure that they're healthy and safe is important.
President
Mrs. Reese.
Kaler, Vice
Go ahead.
President Reese, apologize. Just wanted to reiterate again how important, again, obviously, as a policy, we've adopted a mask policy, and our mitigation plan is our strategies, our procedures, our protocols. I think one of the things that you mentioned here is that we're not done navigating this yet. This is here for a while, and again, we're going to have to continue to be vigilant on implementation of this, and the more we learn, the more it impacts our behavior and how we move forward. And so awareness is really important. One of the things Jillian has actually shared with me is that from the roadshow in her own demographic numbers, one of the things from her roadshow, even sharing this information, even on the staff side, we've seen an improvement. So I think, again, ongoing communication, navigation of this as things continue to evolve and change is going to be a part and process of this because, again, it's not away yet. And we're going to have to continue to stay vigilant. So I appreciate your concern. I hear what you're saying. I will tell you that there isn't an administrative meeting in which a good predominant amount of time isn't dedicated to COVID crisis management and momentum. And I don't foresee that changing. And so I think people in some cases don't intentionally, but we've had scenarios where we're learning, and so I think we'll continue to see that be a reality for us as we move forward in the new year. So I appreciate the perspective.
President Kayla, thank you. Well, thank you for to Ms. Fulton and the folks that made this. I think who made that. I think it's really important, and I agree, Ms. Reese. You know that I do. It's so infuriating that so much of this is avoidable if people would just follow the advice of experts. And I'm sure that frustrates you on a nightly basis. It does keep me up too. My rage meter is very high, but what I'm about to say, I'm not minimizing these things, but you're talking about 37 staff cases, which is 37 too many, but 37, so 72% of 37 people, so like low 30s, could have avoided this. Out of thousands of people that come to work in our district, in our area. So if those folks would just adhere to what we're all asking, what the rest of us are all sacrificing and doing, we'd be ahead of this thing. So, if you see somebody or you know somebody that's, I'm not asking you to approach strangers at Target. That's probably not the safest thing to do. But if you know somebody who's, willfully ignorant, maybe help educate them. We're educators. So anyway, thank you for your comments, though. I agree.
Thank you all. I know, Mrs. Fulton, it's a day and night, 24-hour in your head. I don't know how you sleep. But again, it does go back to also, this country is still very divided on many, many things. Our communities are divided on many different issues. And this is an area where if your child is sick, please stay home. Stay home and also go get a test. This is not the time to be sending kids to school sick and playing some kind of Russian roulette game. And I've seen it and I've heard it. I've heard teachers talk about it, and we need to do better. So I'm really asking for our community, no matter what side of the coins you're falling on right now, that we just work together to keep our schools open. We were just talking a little bit earlier, we were saying, well, the kids are winning because they're in school, but there's not a lot of wins in education right now, period. It's just really, really tough. And so anything we can do to curb that and convince our parents, please especially our high school, keep your mask on all day long. Please, students, you're teenagers, and I know you can, if the littles can do it, our teenagers can do it. And it is a time not to let up in our vigilance when it comes to enforcing that mask, cleaning, those protocols. Like many have worked so hard on these policies and procedures, and we're trying so hard, so we need the help of everybody. So thank you for all the comments. Thank you. Okay. I think we get to have next is Mr. Gadd in review of our 21 M&O budget. This will be fun next. Thank you, Jillian. Mrs. Fulton, sorry. Thank you.
Madam President, members of the board, this is our revision number 1 to the projection that we gave you at the last meeting on I guess it was in November 18th. The projection that you have here is based upon information that we have received since that date. Some of the major changes that have occurred here is we have an ADM loss of about 150 students that we did not anticipate in the first revision. That comes off of the finalization of the 40th day count. While the budget is based upon the 100th day count in early January, it's pretty flat usually between the 40th and the 100th. So that does represent less money because we will be reducing our budget, the projection we have, at least at this point, by 150 students. That causes both an adjustment to the 2021 adopted budget when we show it to you for approval in May as a revision, because you remember that the M&O budget is based upon current year funding, so it's based upon the ADM that you achieve in that budget year. And then, and so we will be adjusting that downward, but we also will be increasing the budget balance carry forward, which was an estimate last June when that adopted budget was presented to you. That 3.5 million that you see will be going up substantially, over 7 million. So the district has that buffer that was created last year during the year of a difference between typically the number of budgeted positions we have and how quickly we can fill vacancies, and then there's that difference between the two, and that generates, because this budget is obviously very heavily weighted toward salaries and benefits, about 90%. So that's allowed us to have that larger budget balance carry forward, and that's where we intend to take the 150 from when we present it to you in May for approval. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second one is, as you look at the comparison to 21-22, we've adjusted that revenue control limit down, as you can see, from 80 million to 79. That's a function of 150 less students that we're carrying forward into that year, and an inflation factor of 1%. So it's a gain and a loss at the same time. We currently are transferring $6 million, as some of the board members are aware, from M&O to capital outlay. That's been going on for quite some time. We would very much like to have a plan where we could eliminate that transfer and spend it where it was intended to, which is in the operating budget. So we're working on presenting to you some alternatives in that regard. One of the ways that we are going to be adjusting 21-22 is since we came into this year with a budget balance carry forward of almost $8 million, we believe that we can basically take half of that, assume that we'll create that same balance over again, but now assign that amount, half of that amount, to specifics, to positions, to salary increases, to benefits. Because 8 million is fairly high, it's a 10% plus carry forward. It doesn't need to be that high, and so this projection here takes that down to a little less than 5%. And we're comfortable with that. I mean, given the magnitude of that budget balance carry forward, et cetera. And most districts are probably in the same position because all of us are having difficulties in filling positions. And it takes quite a while between the time the person leaves and we find a replacement. So that we have confidence it will repeat itself. The Prop 123 money is a state trust land money that was added to everybody's M&O budget here a couple years ago. It has a sunset of 2025, so it is like Proposition 301, and that is unless the legislature extends that funding beyond 25, then it will not exist any longer. So it's one of those where they're going to have to take action, and they won't obviously do that typically until they get right up against the end of the date and that sort of thing. The budget balance carry forward, then, if you take into account what I've just said, we're guessing it's about $3.7 million that we will be able to use in 21-22. We're continue, of course, the 15% override. And, you know, we've subtracted money here from the total for that $6 million transfer from M&O to capital. We wanted to show you that, but we also wanted to show you the last line here is that we are lessening that transfer by $1.6 million. So we're basically transferring 4.4, the difference. And that 4.4 represents the annual lease payment only of the two middle schools. All other capital expenditures that would have occurred between the 4.4 and the 6 million, we intend to absorb in the project capital outlay budget for next year, which you'll see at the next board meeting on the 20th. Part of that's possible because the governor has restored the previous capital outlay reduction cuts to 15% now. That's the remaining cut amount. We're not assuming that with the economic environment that we have that they'll restore the 15%, but the last restoration was fairly large, so it gives us some extra capital money that we think we can use to reduce that transfer from M&O. And our long-term goal is to basically discontinue the transfer entirely, and that will depend upon the board's direction on capital outlay and on a bond and some other things that you'll see on the 20th, because those represent additional capital outlay sources that we don't currently have assigned to payment of those leases. So if that occurs, then we can bring that money back to M&O, use it for the intended purpose, and continue those lease payments from a new capital funding source. That lease is a very long lease, as you may remember, extremely long. I think it's 2052, it's a long ways out. And it would be nice if we had a plan that could prepay maybe some of that lease amount earlier. The interest, of course, on that lease is extremely high, given the length of time that lease is going to run. So that will also be part of what we talked to you about a bit later. So after we look at the amount that we have in the 2021 budget and the amount that's projected for 21-22, we have a net difference of a $5.3 million gain. And a lot of that gain has come from using that budget balance carry forward. That's been key to this projection. And we have every reason to believe it will repeat itself, and we're simply taking about half of that and assigning it to specific budget items. So that 5.3 then becomes available for next year for the board to decide how they want to assign it. And that's the subject of the next slide that you see. We have put at the top the $5.3 million carry forward or available new monies for 21-22 at the top. We've subtracted $1.5 million from that amount for some fairly obvious fixed costs that we think we're going to incur that we'll have to assign more budget money to. The medical insurance subject doesn't come as a surprise. That's projected at this point with the dollar amount involved of going up as much as 10%. The workers' comp area also is going to have, we believe, an increase in the premium. And we will be looking at that premium specifically in the spring when the renewal is due for July 1. So we're basically setting aside monies, if you will, for both of these items because we won't know specifically how much that increase will be until we get into the March-April timeframe, because that will be the renewal date. We also thought we should reserve, it would be prudent for us to reserve some monies for any additional full-time equivalent positions the board chooses to add. Don't know what those are at this point. I suppose teachers, but that's going to depend on what happens with enrollment and some other things, but we thought it would be good to reserve some money for the board's ability then to do that. And reclassification of some staff members may be a part of that. So it's just to try to make sure that there's money available there for the board to decide what they want to do. And the last one is transfers, transfer amount from what previously was being paid from the Classroom Site Fund, Prop 301, to M&O. Most districts do not assign full-time salaries to the Classroom Site Fund. They assign teacher compensation to the Classroom Site Fund. There's a difference between the two. One of them is an additional amount that every teacher will earn automatically. The other one is a subtraction from the amount that they would earn through funding positions that were previously included in the Classroom Site Fund. So specifically in this particular case, the literacy coaches, we picked literacy coaches because they represented approximately half of the amount being spent from the Classroom Site Fund for full-time positions. We've transferred it to M&O, and I went back and looked at the board authorization when those positions were added, and it said either the Classroom Site Fund or Prop 123. Prop 123 is M&O. I mean, that's where that money goes. So it does fit with what the prior board approval has been, and it allows us primarily to accomplish one thing, which is to maintain the current compensation level in 301 for teachers with a projection of reduced sales tax because of the COVID environment. That's what that all is about. And we're fortunate that we have the ability to do that because of the budget balance carry forward. And some of that ability has been enhanced by COVID. I mean, that COVID money that we'll talk about in a minute is going to contribute to the M&O budget balance carry forward this year because we'll be transferring expenditures from M&O to those grants. And that helps us also be in a position to absorb that $500,000 transfer from Classroom Site. So the whole goal with this particular is to maintain the amount that we're currently paying teachers while we're doing it in a declining revenue environment currently. We're estimating that we'll lose about $35 a student in the sales tax multiplier, and that's times 15,000 students. So if you take that 35 and multiply it, you'll get a little over $500,000 in that process. And so this is an offset to that. So rather than take down the 301 and the compensation to all teachers, we've left it the same. We've simply moved out of that budget full-time position so that we can assign it to salary increases. And then...
Just quickly, Mr. Gadd, if I could interject briefly. Good evening, President Kaler, members of the board. I want to comment a little bit on the reserve for the FTE. As you know, we are looking at formally having our Higley Virtual Academy next year. So as we anticipate additional FTEs to be able to support that virtual academy, we know we're going to have to create some positions in that area. Additionally, the board has been interested in creating other positions in the past, and we have not been able to financially do that. But given the carryover, we're looking at that too. So PD and events coordinator position, that has been a priority for the district, something along those lines. And we're working diligently with Mr. Gadd as well as a cabinet to determine what our priority areas are, and also looking at those also called vacancy value or vacancy savings, and seeing how we can take those dollars to help maximize some other areas, as well as positions that had been previously funded and held and not filled, and whether or not we need to repurpose those into other areas that are important that we need to support the district and the vision that we have and where we need to go.
The next step in this slide is to subtract from the 5.3 million that we have available from the first slide, the 1.5 remaining, then leaving a remaining amount of 3.7 million. And we've shown you at the bottom of this slide what different varying amounts of a percentage of salary increase for all employees would cost, including the connected benefits. So if you would pick, I'll just pick a number, if you pick 3%, and you apply that 3.7 million to that, you would have $1.6 million left over to spend in whatever other way you would want. If you chose to do a 5%, then you would have that $243,000 left for any other things that you might want to assign. So it's obvious that we've tried in this case to protect staff with their salaries, particularly in 301. And we've also put an emphasis on staff salary improvement and benefits. And that's available to you here in this table if you choose to use it, all the way up to the 5% level, which is, I believe, where we would like to see you go, but that's going to be up to the board, and we have a ways to go before we get to the spring, and that decision is going to have to be made. Let me just mention a few things about COVID. You heard me talk about $6 million, I think, at the last meeting. Well, that didn't come true. We all were optimistic that
We're shocked.
Yeah. We were all optimistic that if we applied this formula, that's how much we would get, and everybody thought the same thing. But our impressions currently, and it's a confusing subject, believe me, it's very confusing. Every district somewhat has their own view of how this is going to play out, but the governor ran out of money. The $370 million, that's what stopped across the board, no matter what you thought of the calculation. Whether you thought it was ADM and 98% or whatever, it doesn't matter. He ran out of money. And so he's then distributed that money in the form of grants to all of the districts, and that's typically been roughly 50% or less of what was originally thought to be the funding amount. In our particular case, it's 2.6 million. It's not 6. And you can add to that some COVID money from what's called an ESSER grant. That's federal, and that's another 600,000. So it will net out of this about 3.2 million, where we had kind of thought we would be in the $6 million category. We're not. And neither is anyone else. It typically is half of what they had planned on. So we've used that in these projections, and where it's important to us is it's assigned to budget balance carry forward, as I mentioned earlier in M&O. Whatever amount of money we get, and we now have been notified formally that those are the 2 grant amounts. That helps us then do some changes, as you know, to the budget balance carry forward in which to generate new money for next year. So we're using the COVID as a leverage in order to make that happen. And we've incorporated in the projections you've seen the lower dollar amount, the 3.2. And no reason to believe that that's going to necessarily change unless legislation at the national level would allow more money for schools, and that may or may not occur. And so the bottom line is we've taken what we've been notified of and assume that that's all we're going to get for the year. And I say the formulas, I guess in deference a little bit to the state, they have said multiple times that the formulas are only as good as the 370 million is. Well, obviously a lot of districts, including ours, have lost students, a lot of students. Some districts, our 150 looks awfully good to them. I mean, they're above 500 with their loss amounts. So you can imagine the kind of hit that they're taking with that reduction in their revenue control limit because of the state reducing its funding formula and not having COVID money to offset it. So anyway, Madam President, members of the board, that's the presentation. Will be back to you on January 20th if you approve the revised calendar. And we intend to add to this projection the capital outlay subject. And that is another whole subject to talk about, but it has some implications, not only for obviously our facilities and our textbooks and other things, but it has an implication to those leases that would maybe restore money back to M&O that later on, the board could use for whatever their needs happen to be. It would tend to preserve program in M&O, irregardless of what might happen with enrollment. So with that, members of the board, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them for you.
I was just going to take back my thank you again to Mr. Ducey, because I think I thanked him for $6 million, and now I have to unthank him again. So
He'll blame the government for not sending him more than 370.
okay, okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Gadd. Appreciate that. Any questions, Mr. Glover?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gadd, for that. What I really like seeing in here is the salary increase with benefits, the percentages for you guys. Obviously, I won't be here, but I just wanted to give a little push. 5% to classified means a whole lot more with what they make. So I would just hope that you can prioritize that. In the past, I think we've given teachers a higher percent as we move to 20 by 20, and I would love to see it and be, it doesn't matter if I'm fully supportive, I would be fully supportive if I were here to give them as much as possible for helping us through this.
Yeah, you'll notice the projection, Mr. Glover and members of the board, that it projects 5% for all staff. That's why it's broken down on the left-hand side.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gadd. We will see you again in January.
Yes, we will.
And I think that worked even better with our budget planning to have the meeting another week later too. So that was another perk of having just that one meeting in January. Next up is going to be our winter sports update with Mr. Lotzenheiser.
President Kaler, members of the board, just a brief presentation about where we are from an athletic standpoint in terms of going into the winter season. Before I jump into that, I need to publicly congratulate the 8th grade flag football team at Sossaman Middle School for being the EVC champions this year. Normally we bring them in and have a big presentation. We haven't done that yet, but to all of the Sossaman families for the flag football, congratulations on your championship. 7th grade took runner-up, so they had 2 opportunities and did a wonderful job there at Sossaman. As you know, go ahead, thank you. As you know, the AIA has come out for the start of the winter sports with some mitigation strategies in place, and honestly, these are very different than what we saw in the fall, and so I'd just like to update them with you. Permissive practice was allowed to start on November 30th, and so by permissive practice, it means that the teams switch from their out-of-season workouts to actually having a formal practice in place. The teams have to have at least 14 days of practice prior to the start of games. But what the AIA did is they moved the games and said they can't start until January 5th. Typically, our winter sports, we would have started the week of Thanksgiving. And that's when tournaments would have happened. We would have had non-conference games prior to Christmas. Then there would have been a Christmas tournament, and they probably would have got somewhere between, 12 to 15 games in prior to Christmas happening. But that's not allowed this year. These tournaments and invitationals have been canceled, and basically they've reduced the season to about 6 to 8 weeks right after Christmas starts, or when we come back in January 5th. And so they have to have at least 14 days of practice. Spectators are not allowed at any of the games, and this is a big change from what they've done prior to this. And so there will be no spectators until the county metrics approve, and that will be driven by the AIA. That will not be driven by us locally making those decisions. So that was a big change, and this goes for all of the different winter sports that are occurring right now. And so I know that we have the ability to stream our games using the I forget the name of it, but we have the ability to, we're using our Pixelot cameras to stream the game. So parents are still going to be able to view the games. They're just not going to be able to do it live. Like we said, that the tournaments and invitationals are not allowed. And then AI has put an additional statement in there that student athletes who participate in club sports have to quarantine from their sport for 14 days before they're allowed to start practicing. And this honestly is a pretty big one. As you've seen in the media and you've seen around, club sports are not stopping. And they're continuing on, especially if you looked at the big, before Thanksgiving, 500-team soccer tournament that was coming. The basketball tournaments are continuing. The club is not out there. That's a big business, and they're not stopping. And so what the AIA is doing is to be safe for our athletes, that if you leave, if you travel, if you're a part of a club, then you cannot practice with us for 14 days. And so we've been communicating that with our athletes. So as we look at the winter sports at the high school level, we have boys and girls basketball, boys and girls soccer, and boys and girls wrestling. Those are the ones that are starting. Like we said, coaches had the option. We gave for our two sites. Coaches could choose whether they wanted to start on the 30th. Some coaches said no, and probably because a lot of their kids might have been playing club and might have been going to some of those tournaments, so they were going to start a little bit later. But coaches who were ready to go and had kids that were ready, they were able to start and hold selections then, starting November 30th. The middle school, the EVC has basically adopted the rules from the AIA and are going to follow them very similarly. Our second season practices were allowed to start at November 30th, which traditionally for a middle school, they only have about 4 practices before they start games. Now they get 3 weeks. They don't practice during the breaks. When they come back, then games are going to be allowed to start the week of January 5th, and no spectators. We're going to continue on that. Unfortunately, we don't have the ability to stream them live. However, we're working at the sites about having someone be able to film them and then provide the film then to the parents, so they do have the opportunity to see their students participate. The sports are boys basketball, girls softball, boys and girls cross country, and cheer for this second season. Remember, with the EVC, we've adjusted it, and so we're trying to basically fit 4 seasons into 3 quarters. And so we've already compacted it. I don't think we want to try to compact it any further, but we'll continue to go forward with that. So that's kind of the update of where we're at from the winter sports. Questions?
I don't think so. Thank you so much. And we're going to hear from you more in a little bit, I do believe. Next up, action item 8.1. There we go. Thank you, Curtis. I move that the board approve the 2021-2022 middle school, high school, and Higley Virtual Academy course guides.
Second.
We've already had a work study. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries 4-0. 8.2. I move that the board approve the December payout of longevity pay for 2020-2021 school year in the amounts listed for the years of service, totaling $10,000.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Mr. Glover?
Well, I guess it's probably irrelevant, but you know, this was done long before, and it was done at a time when people were going long times without raises. But that has since changed. And so, I don't know, I guess if I were sticking around, I might ask that these be phased out. I think it's always good when you can dump as much money as you can into salaries and to pay towards retirements and things like that. So if I were sticking around, I would probably ask that years 5, 10, 15, I would make a motion that they be eliminated after this year, and then 20, 25, and 30 get phased out over 4 years. So I would leave that with you. Do with it what you will, and I am not going to vote against this for that, just for that, but I'm planting a seed.
Thanks, Mr. Glover, I think. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Next up, we have some future agenda items still coming. We're going to have budget in January, technology, our liability insurance plan renewal and review in March. And that's going to also include our district attorney and prepaid legal. And then we're still working on how we prepare students for life beyond high school. Anything else that you would like to see? I think we have plenty to come, and we're still going to be navigating said COVID. So thank you for that. So next up, we are going to hear from Mr. Lotzenheiser again. We are going to have a little work study on our athletic handbook update. Take it away.
President Kaler, members of the board. Thank you. So this has been an ongoing process Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So tonight we're going to talk to you about the committees that were involved in revising the athletic handbook. We're going to talk about some specific handbook revisions, including within that codes of conduct and an additional new code of conduct that's being added this year. And then talk about clarifications and recommendations coming from the athletic committees. So this process was started last year under the direction of Dr. Fowler. And I just want to give credit to the people who had the meetings and were involved. You'll notice from the high school level, we have our athletic directors and then a selection of coaches involved. And at the middle school, the exact same thing. Some of those people are no longer with us, but these meetings took place last year because the real intention was to have this meeting, I think, last March. And so we're a little bit behind and delayed, but finally we're able to get it here for you. This year, I kind of shrunk it down and just dealt with our athletic directors. And at this time, I need to give them a very public shout out for all of the work that they do. Sometimes being an athletic director is a very thankless job because when something goes great, the coach has done wonderful, and something goes bad, it's all on the AD, right? But these guys really put in time, effort, and energy into creating positive atmosphere for their coaches, for their student athletes, and for running events. And it has been very, very challenging in the area of COVID. But I greatly appreciate them, Mr. Stengel, who's at Williams Field, Mr. Dilly, who's at Higley High, Mr. Keeling at Sossaman, and then Ms. Schwartz, who is at Cooley. And they've worked with me to do some more revisions to the document. So when updating the athletic document, our goal was to make sure we had the correct information and contacts in there. And we wanted the document to reflect practice. I think sometimes over time things change. And what the wording was maybe 5 years ago wouldn't have been what we need to do it now. And so we wanted to make sure that our practice reflected what's happening within the handbook. And we want this to be a guide for the coaches and the athletic program so that they have some expectations put in place at all levels. And then, once again, those expectations for coaches, student athletes, and for parents so they have a resource that they can use. When we say provide recommendations for future areas of growth, it's also clarifications from questions that have come up, including off-season expectations for coaches and programs. We'll talk about those. Different coaching positions and the expectation of the positions. And then what is our long-term visions for the athletic department support? So the handbook revisions, we update the contacts and the scheduling that's within it. We renewed the HUSD mission statement, and I just want to clarify it here again because I think it's great. The mission of interscholastic athletic activities in Higley Unified School Districts to extend educational opportunities to athletic competition performance while maximizing participation in programs that promote citizenship, sportsmanship, a healthy lifestyle, and positive life skills. There's so many things that our students learn because of participation in athletics, and we want to keep that as a focus for what we do with our coaches and our programs. We removed the outdated Pursuing Victory with Honor. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the document. Pursuing Victory with Honor was an initiative sponsored by the AIA quite a few years ago, and it kept moving forward. They're changing into a different direction called Inside Out Coaching, and it's starting just scratching the surface with that now. We will be looking at implementing some of those practices. However, we have continued our partnership with the Positive Coaching Alliance. It's been a little harder this year because the people can't come onto campus, so we've had to have some Zoom meetings and different things like that with our teams, but we want to continue that partnership, and I know that we have a vendor that helps fund that for us, and we greatly appreciate that partnership with the Positive Coaching Alliance. We use something called Register My Athlete, and so that is where we take all the documents and forms that parents have to sign, and we put them online, and it's a very nice data warehouse for us. And so what we found is that each of the campuses had their own little wrinkle, and so one of the goals of the committee and the ADs working together was to make that consistent. And so a parent in one school is basically doing the same thing as a parent at the other school. A lot of things come out of that, including concussion handbook, the expectations. It's an awareness thing that parents have to say, yes, we are aware of some of the expectations, including travel. And then when you get to the high school level, forms that allow students then to provide travel for themselves. And then we added some COVID-19 disclaimers because there are some things in there that we think would be great, and this year we couldn't do them. And so we just added, in case of a pandemic, some of these things might change. I know it might sound silly, but we want to have that in the handbook as well. So let's talk about eligibility. And so in talking about eligibility, there are guidelines from the AIA, and what I found is that the guidelines that HUSD were a little bit stricter, and so I wanted to clarify that. And this is one of those areas where we want our handbook to reflect the practice that we were doing. Student athletes must maintain above a 2.3 GPA and not have any failing grades, and we do it at the progress report time, 4.5 weeks, 9 weeks, 13 and a half weeks, and then the semester posted grades. So it's not necessarily a weekly thing that's happening. We look at those grades. However, we do give the opportunity for students to raise their grades every week once they're determined and eligible. And so that second bullet talks about student athletes will be ineligible for at least 1 week. And then if they improve their grade by going to tutoring, by working with the teacher, sometimes it's missing assignments, this is a carrot for them. We don't want to take away their ability to participate, but they need to perform in the classroom before they can perform on the court or the field. And so what happens is if that becomes, they get their grade up, they become eligible the following week. And so they do have to sit for at least one competition. Let's take football for an example. Let's say someone is ineligible. The game's on Friday. Wednesday, they've turned in all their stuff. They get their grade up. They don't become eligible again until the next Monday. And so they do lose a competition. There are some consequences for not keeping your grades up.
Mr. Watson, can
Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
interrupt as you're talking about that? Was there some discussion with, I guess, concern of teachers not getting stuff entered into the system so that grades were correctly reflected?
I think we always have anecdotal situations sometimes where that happens, especially, I would say, at the 4.5 week and the 13.5 week progress reports, because they're not as formal as the 9 week and the 18 week one. And that's where we need to make sure that we're working with the teacher. Because sometimes, honestly, if it's a teacher mistake, then the athletic director has the ability to go back and say, hey, we caught where this mistake was. And then perhaps their eligibility would change right away. But that's a very unique, specific one where we would work directly with the kids. And that's a good catch and balance, right?
Well, and I know at the 4.5 week one that maybe they had one quiz.
Correct.
And didn't do so well on the quiz.
Right.
And it drops their grade tremendously because there's not much in the grade book. So, I mean, these are things that I hear from multiple different sports and competitions, usually at the beginning of the school year. As more assignments, more tests, more quizzes get put into the grade book, those grades come up. But I didn't know if, with meeting with the athletic directors, if there was any discussion on that, because I know there's just not a lot entered.
Right.
And in 4.5 weeks, you may have had 2 quizzes, which has a higher weighted grade, and may not have done so well, but it doesn't mean you're not, I mean, there's just not a lot to take from there. So was that any part of the conversation?
I think the part of the conversation was, Vice President Reese, was not to eliminate the 4.5 week. It's more just to make sure that we're on top. And then if a certain situation like that happens, that we'll work with that kid, because we also don't want to be punitive when it's not a true reflection of what's happening or what the kid's doing. Yes, with the more grades are in there, the more room you have for error, right? And so that 4.5 week one, when there is only a few. And honestly, and to go to the third dot, with COVID-19, we basically washed the whole first part in looking at it and say we're a lot more flexible about what was happening, especially when we're talking about the whole big transition from, remote learning to in-person and how that affected kids and what they were trying to do. And so we gave a lot of grace and basically looked at the 13.5 week as the first time we looked at eligibility. That was consistent with my peers. I talked to the people in the districts around us like, what are you guys doing? Is it fair for us to get on a kid at the 9 weeks when they had to go through a situation that they were not prepared to handle? And we all agreed that we didn't think that it was very fair. So for code of conduct, one of the things that I think was asked from the board is to look and say, we have already had a student code of conduct through the AIA, and we will continue to do that. There was a parent code of conduct in there as well. There was a spectator code of conduct in there, but we didn't have a code of conduct for coaches. And so this is why I need to give credit to Dr. Fowler and the committees that he did last spring. He worked with the Positive Coaching Alliance and his committees, and they came up with a new code of conduct for coaches that we didn't have implemented by the time we started school. But for the winter season, we have implemented this with our coaches and have been sharing this and asking them to sign this code of conduct. And really, go back, please. Really what we wanted to do is that this defines how they act. It's not necessarily defining how they run their program. But these are the expectations of what we'd like them to focus on, especially in their behavior as role models to kids. And so this just is a document that helps us clarify what those expectations are. Go ahead. And so this is an example. This is the code of conduct that they will be looking at. I know it's rather small. I apologize for how I put it in there. But really, it's focusing again on guidelines coming from the Positive Coaching Alliance. And the goal is that this idea of respect and mutual respect that goes back and forth between players and coaches and families. And so our coaches are role models. They are role models all the time, and every interaction they have with a student athlete and with a parent is an important interaction to allow them to help shape and mold our students. And so when you look at it, I understand the behavior expectations of my school, and I hereby accept responsibility to become a model of ethical behavior, integrity, and good citizenship. Then it goes and continues to identify a little bit more clarity what they're looking for. You know, what I like is we coach for mastery of sport, not just scoreboard wins. That it's not just about chasing victories, because the impact we're going to have on our students is a lot more than the wins and losses, but it's how we're developing those life skills and what the positive influence that we can have. And so all of the coaches should have been presented this by their athletic directors. I know our athletic directors were very positive and thought that this was a good thing because it also sparks conversation and it has an accountability piece. So if there's behavior going on, we can go back directly to the coach and say, remember, these are the expectations we outlined for you ahead of time. And just like we would with our athletes, or just like teachers in the classroom would with students, here's the expectations. If you're not meeting them, we're going to give you some time to change your behavior and to look at the expectations we're meeting, but then it also gives us an accountability that if these are not things that you agree with or want to do, then maybe perhaps this isn't the right employment position for them.
Mr. Lotzenhauser, that was a big thing. I think Mrs. Reese and I were both really wanting was some kind of coach contract. So that is awesome that was added. Thank you, Dr. Fowler. And then just a real quick question. So are coaches ever formally evaluated throughout the season?
So that is this was actually a big topic of conversation within our committee and in dealing with the athletic directors. There's an informal evaluation system that goes on, but there's not a rubric or anything that has been followed throughout the season in terms of a formal evaluation. There are informal evaluations where they meet at the end of the year, they discuss the progress, and then the head coaches are to evaluate theirs. But there's two different thoughts on that, how it goes. Some part of the thought is I can do a less formal evaluation in terms of us giving back feedback. Sometimes what happens is when we have a really formal one, if people rush through it and just put things down, now when a situation arises, we've painted ourselves in a corner because we've never really addressed some of the issues because we've been, to lack of a better word, too nice to do that. And so my conversation with our coaches is that's an area that we need to look at and look at formalizing about what happens. How are we documenting what's going on? How are we providing support if there's a situation going on and guidance if there needs to be changes? So there isn't anything formal in there right now. However, that was a big part of the discussion we had within our group. So to go on and look at some clarifications and some recommendations, I know one of the questions that was brought up to the committees and in talking with Dr. Fowler was a question that was happening last year. What are the expectations for out-of-season activities? And so I just want to clarify, when we give our coaches a coaching stipend, that's for their in-season work of what they do. But we know, because what's been allowed, is that coaches can basically continue to have off-season workouts as much as they want outside of the season. And so we wanted to make sure that the outside of the season activities and expectations are going to be at the discretion of the coach and the athletic director working together. And, you know, when you look at it, really it's their ownership of their program about how they want to work in the off-season. There's a lot of different philosophies that go on out there. It is not our expectation as the district to come in and tell them this is exactly what you have to do in the off-season, because it doesn't fit necessarily the models of what their philosophy is or how they work. I know that could lead to the experience might be a little different, and when you only have two schools, it's easy to compare. The experience off-season might be different at one school than it would be at the other school, and that's a reality because if you were in a district with 6 schools like I used to be, they were all different as well. It just gets highlighted when there's only 2 and there's one comparable. You know, when we look at the off-season, and this is where I need to talk about our coaches and the amount of time that they give in and they give up, whether it's an open gym, whether it's an open field, whether they're running a weight room, and a lot of time it's not for compensation. And so when you take a look at the amount that they get during the season for that stipend, and then you truly said, how much time are you putting in outside? That's when we look at the hourly rate of pay for coaches is not extremely high. And we know a lot of time it's a labor of love, and we really appreciate what they do for that. But within the out season, we don't think it's appropriate for us to start putting in different expectations about you have to do this or you have to do that. Now, we want to hire people who want to do that, but sometimes things get in the way, and we don't want to force that expectation because also at the same time, we're not in a position where we would want to add additional necessarily. Now you have an off-season stipend or a summer stipend, different things like that. That's not the system that we have set up. However, we do have an ability. Coaches can offer camps and clinics through our community education where the kids can pay, and there are different things, and that's a way for them to support the program and support some of the time that they put in as well. That's done through community ed. And so as long as that's organized and we have processes, and once again, the athletic directors are very heavily involved in deciding what happens and helping with the off-season. So hopefully that clarified kind of where our expectation for off-season programs was. I know that was a question that was asked further. Is there any more clarification you'd like on that one? Okay. One thing that they really would strongly suggest is that we look at reinstituting the varsity coach position at the high school level. Right now we have a head coach, a head JV coach, and a head freshman coach. A lot of our surrounding areas also provide a varsity assistant stipend. And so that's coming out of the budgets from the athletics. And they also feel like it's a great way to continue to support staff other than having to do fundraising to be able to support that position. Speaking of money, I'm continuing to audit the athletic department budgets for spending and the coaching stipends. For me to come in, I think it's important for us to look and say, where are we spending our money and how are we spending it? And are we spending it appropriately? And those are honest conversations that I'm having with our athletic directors. I've looked at the last 3 years. Once I have a formal final report, I'll present that to you guys within status. But looking at the last 3 years, and I'm looking to find where are our big ticket items and how are we funding our big ticket items? And part of this goes to, there was a question asked, about our participation fees and where are our participation fees relative to the people in our area. And so I'm looking at that because what's happening, some of the people that have a less participation fee has supplied a direct athletic budget out of M&O for athletics, where traditionally in Higley we have not had that. And we've been relying on our athletic fees and our gate receipts to fund a lot of the different things in our budgets, including transportation, including AIE dues. Believe it or not, a huge one out there is helmet reconditioning for football because we have to make sure that they're on. So that's $12,000 to $15,000 a year. A lot of different things, plus we get into gear for kids, all of the different upkeep. So my goal is to be able to look at these different pots, make sure that we're spending it appropriate, and then how, when we talk about supporting athletic departments, can I go to Dr. Foley and Mr. Gadd and say, where can we adjust some things within our budgets to perhaps fill in some of the gaps so it might not be on the parents directly to be doing, but it come out of our district. But those are a lot of discussions that we're continuing to have, and that's not an easy answer to have for you. But that's really something that I think is important for us.
Mr. Lotzenheiser, can you, when you do that, can you also try and get information on what the boosters are covering? I know on some of those bigger sports, their boosters do a ton of fundraising. And, I look at things as the have-to-haves and the want-to-haves.
Correct.
And on the things that they want to have, the nice-to-have, if their boosters are fundraising for those things because they want a little bit extra, that's great. My concern is, like you were just saying, are their boosters covering some of the have-to-haves? And we need to look at that. But when you're looking at the athletic department budgets, if you can also try and get an overview of what their boosters and what they're spending on different items as well.
Okay, I would, Vice President Reese.
And I would say with the caveat that this year fundraising has been in the tank for so many of our, beloved PTO, everybody. So I guess this year we kind of look at that a little bit differently, but you can see in the past.
That's why we're trying to go historically where we were at and how we were funding things historically. But Vice President Reese, I absolutely agree. There are some minimal things that we need to make sure that we are providing as a district. And then if coaches and programs want things above that, that's why there is boosters, to help and support the student athletes as they go through. And then finally, the last thing that we want to add is a yearly process to update the athletic handbook. And I'll be honest, I have not instituted that yet. We're still playing a little bit catch up in certain areas, but to have it so that we review it, because I think some of the conversations that come out of it are great when we start getting into specifics. And that's where I'd like to bring back some of the coaches to be able to look and help vet us with some of the different things. Didn't do that this time, but that's in the future. So any additional questions?
You have been a busy guy, Mr. Lotzenheiser. So first, congratulations on getting the course guide passed. That is a huge, huge accomplishment.
We had lots of help. Please.
So, but you've been a welcome addition to the team, and I thank you and Dr. Fowler for all the work on this. It straightened out some things that we've had trouble with, I think, a little bit in the past. So, thanks.
Thank you.
I agree, Mr. Glover, that definitely there were things in the past that were a little iffy. So it's nice to see it documented and put into writing, and having parents. I know that Register My Athlete is so convenient because it's at home. And then part of me sometimes says people are just checking the boxes and not reading everything. So I struggle a little bit with that, because I know we do have our mandatory sports meetings, and I know that our athletic directors go over expectations very clearly, but I do think sometimes the parents just kind of check the box, and maybe me included. So we need to make sure that, everybody's getting all the information.
President Kaler?
Yes.
Dr. Fowler, thank you for starting this. I know you've been working on it, and I'm sure happily passed it on. But I appreciate this. I would love to get feedback, since some of this was implemented for our winter sports, and see what the feedback is from the athletic directors and the coaches. And, I think the biggest concern or issue we've had are coaches who are not employees. So not necessarily presenting themselves or their team the way we would expect in Higley. And we do have an expectation of our Higley coaches and athletes and everything. So I know we'll loop back around, but that feedback is going to be I'm interested in that, because I know our coaches that are employees, they know what their expectation is within our district, and it's the coaches that are not employees. So when we circle back to this after the spring and everything, that would be great feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time and all the efforts into this awesome document. All right, I think that is it. So, with Mr. Glover, oh, sorry.
No, I didn't. I didn't thank you guys, but thank you for all the many years we've battled together, and sometimes battled against one another. But we're in a much better place than we were 4 years ago. I think so. Thank you.
We can always disagree with a respectful attitude, and I love that about this board. So with that, Mr. Glover and Mr. Witovich enjoy retirement from the school board, and I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Third, fourth, and fifth. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Have a good evening and a wonderful Christmas break.